introduced live on the Limitless channel. Awake souls, limitless, and you.
And ever since I was a kid, everyone said it couldn't be done. My whole life, people have been telling me what I could do and couldn't do. I've always listened to them, believed in what they said. I don't want to do that
anymore.
But I want to tell you something that they don't know. They don't know your heart.
We do.
I do. I've seen it. You have shown it to me. You have shown this coaching staff, your teammates. You have shown yourselves just exactly who you are in here. From the soles of your feet, with every ounce of blood you've got in your body, lay it on the line until the final whistle blows. And if you do that, we cannot lose. How you play today, from this moment on, is how you will be remembered.
Inch by inch, play by play, till we're finished. We're in hell right now, gentlemen. Believe me. You know, when you get old in life, things get taken from you. I mean, that's part of life. But you only learn that when you start losing stuff. We can fight our way back into the light. We can climb out of hell. Every minute, every second. On this team, we fight for that inch. On this team, we tear ourselves and everyone else around us to pieces for that inch. We claw with our fingernails for that inch. Because we know when we add up all those inches, that's gonna make the difference between winning and losing.
They don't know your heart.
I don't want to do that anymore.
Inch by inch, play by play, till we're finished. We're in hell right now, gentlemen. Believe me.
So come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom!
Our Father,
who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, and forever. Amen.
and we are back. It's Friday night. We are live on the Limitless channel, and I'm the Limitless, and I'm so happy to introduce the host with the most, Jason Laufenberg, Awake Souls. How's it going, brother?
It's going rough. I am sick.
That's no good.
Ooh, my gut is just rumbling. I may have to be in and out of here. Ooh, I'm sucking wind. But I would like to get through this message tonight if possible. And so please bear with me, people. I don't feel well.
There's no quit in us. We don't give up. We fight for every inch. Let me just see who's here tonight so far. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Not much has happened this week in the flat earth. Excuse me. We'll maybe have Derek on if we get through what we have to get through. Apparently Derek and I have been kicked out of the official Flat Earth and Globe Earth discussion group. For nothing else but speaking the truth. But yeah, that's another point. Tonight we want to talk about Sir Isaac Newton. And Jason, what do you want to start? You got the link to the video. What do you want to do?
Yeah. So this is a new line of research. This was something I knew about Newton. I knew he was considered like the father of gravity, or I mean, he's the guy that made up the term and made up the description of it. But he's always been presented as just like this clockworks style scientist, that very mechanistic. And I completely missed the fact that he was an absolute huge theist. That's sort of been whitewashed from the whole discussion around him, at least from what I've heard. And I think most people are in a similar position. We have a documentary that was put together by BBC that we would like to go through, and well, there's a lot of truth in it, and even when they're telling you bad things, it's you just gotta see it and understand it in context. But before we get into that, let me go through a few tabs here to set the stage. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't feel well. All right, so we'll start out with this Newton character, and I'll just jump in whenever you see something that you want to weigh in on. All right. So he was born December 25th. He's got this FRS and PRS optics. He like made up calculus, a mathematical language, and so there's that. We can always go through that, but as flat earthers, we're probably most interested in his work and on gravitation, and so he worked at coming up with an explanation for the orbits and trajectories of the planets. And see, we understand those things to just be lights in the sky, and that's all he saw back then too. He didn't see planets drifting around in outer space. He saw lights in the sky the same way you and I see them right now. But he had this fantastical story about universe and these great distances and a power that permeates the universe. And it'll be interesting. We'll get into who he gives credit to this power. He's such a we'll get into it, but he was also head of the Royal Mint. He was a fellow. Now, we're going to get used to a couple of terms. Fellow, fellowship, sirs, knights, adepts. These are all terms around Freemasonry and other secret societies. So he went to Trinity College, right? And let's see. Oh yeah, he was knighted. He was knighted by Queen Anne, and he was master. Here's another Freemasonic term. of the Royal Mint, as well as president of the Royal Society. We can skip through early life, and we'll skip through mathematics, skip through optics. So now he's doing work on the celestial mechanics, and what that is math for something that we actually we don't see these planets. We see lights in the sky. He made clear his heliocentric view of the solar system, and so while he's not the first, he really did a lot of work to support it. And the Principia is a book that is touted as like the pinnacle of science literature, right? Well, we're gonna see where that all comes from. Now later in life, this is where it gets interesting. This is the stuff that I wasn't familiar with. He was extremely religious, and was considered maybe like a heretic because he came into conflict with the teaching of the Trinity and the Catholic Church. He thought that the teaching of the Trinity was wrong, and he felt that he had evidence for that. He feels that it was a mistranslation in the King James Bible that led to this Trinity doctrine. And of course he's right, but what he did is he replaced it with just as bad or maybe worse heresy. So we'll be getting into that. Look at that coat of arms. That looks like a satanic symbol there. And then his time at the Mint, yeah, that has to do with his alchemy. He was an alchemist. And keep in mind that during this time period, being an alchemist is something that you could be put to death for. It was alchemy, was witchcraft. It was also had a lot to do with forgery, and yeah, you didn't want to be recognized as alchemist. That was because it's dark magic, and we'll get into the dark magic of his religious views. All right. So by 1672, he had started to record his theological research in notebooks, which he showed to no one, which have only recently been examined. They demonstrate an extensive knowledge of early church writings and show that in the conflict between Athanasius and Arius, which defined the creed, he took the side of Arius, the loser, who rejected the conventional view of the Trinity. So this Arianism, right, is a non-Trinitarian Christological doctrine which asserts the belief that Jesus Christ, or Yahushua, is the Son of God who was begotten by God the Father at a point in time, a creature distinct from the Father and is therefore subordinate to him, but the Son is also God, God the Son. So this goes back to the John 1:1, another how to tie all this together. There's so much. I wish I was feeling better. Here, let's start with going through this this documentary a little bit. It like I said, this was put together by the BBC. BBC is one of the worst when it comes to copyright strikes. So we are using this in fair use. Let me show you this. This is the name of the documentary, The Dark Heretic, Isaac Newton, BBC 2003 documentary. I can't even find this posted anywhere else other than a repost on YouTube. All right, but we're going through this in fair use.
Do a refresh on the page too. It'll make it a little bit better maybe than you might have at 3.
Oh, okay. That doesn't work.
You have to hit play. Probably.
Lots 1 to 332.
In 1936, a massive archive of Sir Isaac Newton's private manuscripts was put on sale after being kept from the public for more than 200 years.
Of knowledge. Should we say 3? Thank you, sir. £3.
The famous economist John Maynard Keynes acquired 100 lots. For the next 6 years, Keynes worked on breaking the mysterious code in which many were written. These documents drew Keynes into a world inhabited by charlatans and magicians, the world of alchemy. Once Keynes decoded these documents, his view of Newton was shattered.
Well, yeah, I can tell you why. I mean, my view of him was shattered too. His personal notes, you're going to see, make him visible as the satanic occultist that he was.
He realized Britain's most famous scientist was also Britain's most knowledgeable alchemist.
Newton came to be thought of as the first and greatest of the modern age of scientists, a rationalist, one who taught us to think on the lines of cold and untinctured reason. I do not see him in that light. Newton was not the first of the age of reason. He was the last of the magicians.
You catch that?
Yeah, that's bad. This is really bad.
Really bad. I think I can speed this up a little bit, though. You know, they've got it sort of done dramatic. For brevity's sake, let's do this at like 1.5. We'll see how that works.
The scientific genius was also revealed as a religious zealot who interpreted the violent imagery in the Bible as...
All right, so that's the part that's really been whitewashed, is he was a religious zealot that he actually pinpoint, you know, used that all these occult different ways to try to pinpoint the Yahushai's return, and it's interesting. He's close. We'll get to it.
As God's word, thought ancient temples hid the secrets of the universe, and believed he had found in the Bible the date when this corrupt world would end. The cover-up of the dark heretical side of Sir Isaac Newton began soon after his death. At Newton...
Yeah, the cover-up of the dark heretical side. These guys right here were the guys responsible for whitewashing all of the Satanism out of his life, right?
Wow.
Newton's bedside during his final painful moments in 1727, were two men whose adulatory writings would start the process of turning this flawed genius into an unblemished hero. One was John Conduit, married to Newton's half-niece, and the other, William Stukeley, Newton's first biographer.
The pain rose to such a height that the bed under him and the very room shook with his agonies, to the wonder of those who were present.
With the drops of sweat ran down his face, he never complained or cried out, nor showed the least signs of peevishness.
Over the coming years, two of Newton's passions, alchemy and religion, would be hidden. John Conduit published Newton's works, funded Newton's hugely expensive monument in Westminster Abbey, and spread Newtonian propaganda for the rest of it.
And this monument, man, for the people that know anything about occult symbology, we'll see if we get to the monument or
his life.
One of the interesting things about the alchemical papers is that when Newton died, on the wrappers, the man who did the inventorying wrote, "Not fit to be printed," because they would have destroyed that image of Newton as the great natural philosopher, or as we would call the great scientist of his day.
Not fit to be printed because it would discredit him.
He means the great Satanist, right? Not science.
Well, the two Satanists and scientists are two interchangeable words.
Same word, yeah, basically. Yeah.
The story of the hidden Newton begins when Isaac Newton returned to Trinity College, Cambridge in 1667. He was only 25, yet he had lived...
What's that?
Just after 1666, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man.
Through unparalleled political and social turmoil, civil war, regicide, the plague, and the Great Fire of London. Newton had been sheltering from the plague for 2 years at his country home, but it was impossible to escape the religious fervour of the times.
As they look round the world through their providential eyeglasses, all they can see is plague, disorder, chaos, foreriders of the apocalypse. Everything goes wrong. It's a time of absolute uncertainty, and probably for most people, clinging to their vision of God is the thing that gives them some continuity. People are convinced they're right, and that the people they're fighting are the agents of the devil and the Antichrist.
Newton had fervent Protestant beliefs.
He was actually intensely religious. And this is, of course, not the Newton of popular conception, but this is the Newton that we know from his personal manuscript. So he's intensely religious, he's intensely pious, and this Puritan ethic, this austere moral code permeates his entire life.
All right, I just want to replay that. For all the globe earth believers out there that hold this guy up as, being some awesome scientist, he made up gravity. These are usually atheists, people that hate God. The guy that made up your gravity, listen again.
Intensely religious. And this is, of course, not the Newton of popular conception, but this is the Newton that we know from his personal manuscript. So he's intensely religious, he's intensely pious, and this Puritan ethic, this austere moral code permeates his entire life.
He had been shaken by the decadence he had found at Cambridge when he first arrived in 1661.
It was a time, particularly after the restoration of Charles II, it was a time of great fun and frolicking, and I think Newton would have been dismayed by many of the antics of his fellow students, drinking, going after bad young women in local villages.
In disgust, Newton later drew up his own plan for the education of youth in the universities.
All graduates, without exception, found by the proctors in taverns or other drinking houses, shall have their names given to ye Vice-Chancellor, who shall summon them to answer for it before the next consistory.
Typically, Newton suggested devotion to study was the way to resist sexual temptation.
The way to chastity is not to struggle directly with incontinent thoughts, but to avert ye thoughts by some employment, or by reading or meditating on other things. or by converts. For he that's always thinking of chastity will be always thinking of women.
All right, so this is an interesting point that's going to be covered in a couple of different ways here. But he's being presented as being this totally pious, totally chaste person. What's really being said is here is he has a strong aversion to women, and you'll pick up more of it later.
He's a very silent, thoughtful young man who, I suppose, looks as though he's utterly tedious from the outside. There's no evidence, I think, that anyone liked him at all, apart from his friend John Wickens.
John Wickens. All right.
And Newton started sharing chambers after both became depressed about being roomed with students who put pleasure before work.
They have a very peculiar relationship because Wickens is somebody who is of a higher status than Newton at Trinity and seems to have become Newton's amanuensis, i.e. his secretary, over the following 20 years. But they must have been very close. They lived in the same rooms for 20 years. Whether it involved...
Okay, they lived in the same rooms.
Wow. 20 years? That's a long time. Like, I stayed in a trailer, well, it's more like a house, with you for a year and a half. I had my own room. Are they saying that he literally lived in one room with this guy for 20 years?
Yeah. Yeah, well, wait until you see or hear the letter that he wrote when this guy broke up with him later. Ooh.
Oh, wow.
But here you've got the narrator comes in, and he's just going to give you his personal opinion that they didn't have a sexual relationship. But I doubt this guy was actually there and saw what went on in the bedroom.
All the sexual component, we really don't know. But it was the longest running friendship of Newton's life.
For 2 decades, from 1667, Newton would be cocooned in his own private world of study.
Truth is the offspring of silence and unbroken meditation.
Yeah.
I can relate to that. You can study the internet and the truth and all the books. I guarantee it. If this world doesn't burn, we're going to be doing the same thing. We're going to be researching too.
Yeah. And it is a good way to keep your mind off of women, but you also got to keep it off of the men too. You don't want to end up a bag.
Yeah, no, it's simple. Come on. That's a lie that men that focus on chastity I'm a single man who has devoted myself to God and Christianity, and I don't think about women all the time at all. Rarely, it does happen. We all have that cyclic type of chemical things that happen in our bodies, but it's an absolute lie, right? Because I can attest right now. I haven't been with a woman in like 5 or 8 years, and I don't think about it at all, really. Right? Whether I'm watching YouTube, whether I'm watching TV, whether I'm researching, it makes no difference. Studying the truth does not directly link. It's basically a straw man. And I believe that through the Jesuits and the Catholic Church, that whole notion of chastity and the priests not marrying women, and then the supposed leading to raping of children of boys, I think that seems to be an underthread that they try to invoke into chastity to stop people from thinking that they can actually do it, even though apparently the birth rates and the population of North America is completely stopped already, right? So
yeah, so Hanzo Warrior says, you do know that Isaac Newton was Christian. No, he wasn't Christian. He was like Freemason or Rosicrucian.
Well, he was Aryan, right? He believed that he had this other doctrine. He was a Puritan, it said. He was devoutly, he didn't swear. He probably didn't drink in public. He didn't do anything in public that was wrong.
Except he did deny that Yahushua was the creator.
That's a problem. But it's funny that Hanzo, if you just were here from the start, you would have saw that this documentary did discuss that. Well, we'll keep going.
He didn't go anywhere. I mean, he rarely traveled. He never went to the continent. He was that insular. I mean, he stayed in his rooms. He worked 7 days a week, 18 hours a day, and he pushed himself, drove himself.
He had a library of his own that had about 1,600 or 1,800 volumes, but it was very much a world that came to him through printed matter or through manuscripts from others.
In the mid-1660s, Newton had made a bold decision.
I am a friend of Plato. I am a friend of Aristotle. But truth is my greater friend.
Newton had decided to search far beyond the narrow boundaries of the classical teachings for new truths about the universe.
Yeah, he decided that he was going to go into the occult.
He devoured the philosophy of the fashionable French scholar René Descartes. In the early 17th century, Descartes depicted the universe as a giant clockwork machine, created by God, but then left to run.
Sounds like the fake flat Earth.
Yeah.
Exactly like the fake flat Earth, actually.
Yep.
Wow.
Clockwork that was created and just left to run. But the interesting thing is so you got your false dichotomies. You got Descartes that presents the clockwork like the creator's not around anymore, and then here Newton comes in and presents it like a clockwork, and yes, the creator is here and he's returning, and he even names the date. But this
creator was in everything, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's
everything. Creator was in the rocks, and Newton taught everything was the creator. Everything.
Mm-hmm. And you got so many atheists running around touting this guy like he's some sort of hero to him. They don't even know that he's an occultist, and that this whole heliocentric theory is just, it's a cult. It's an absolute cult. And right here is the magician. I mean, it said right in this presentation, he's considered like the last great magician.
At home during the plague years of 1665 and 1666, Newton had been intrigued by Descartes' mechanical philosophy. But he was suspicious of it. There was no role for God after the creation of the universe.
That's Carl
Whence is it
Sagan's.
that nature does nothing in vain? And whence arises all that order and beauty which we see in the world? Does it not appear from phenomena that there is a being, incorporeal, living, intelligent, omnipresent, who, in infinite space, as it were in his sensory, sees the things themselves intimately, and thoroughly perceives them and comprehends them wholly?
This virtual recluse drove himself to test Descartes' theory. Was the universe really a mass of lifeless matter, or a living world run by God? He became fascinated by the force that held the moon in orbit, and caused apples to fall. Surely gravity was a divine force, not a matter of chance. Newton was obsessive. In 18 months he became the greatest mathematician in the world, and invented calculus that enabled him to study the movements of planets in later years.
Yeah. Did you catch that? He invented calculus. He invented calculus, which was able to allow him to study the...
To describe.
Yeah, to describe.
Mathematically describe the motions of the heavenly luminaries, and then thus by creating the Earth as a moving object through an infinite space where everything was relative of everything else, right? This is where it originated from.
Yep.
And another one bites the dust. Hey.
Yeah, Earth is flat, Hanzo. We don't need anybody shilling for the globe here.
A feather or black ribbon put between my eye and the setting sun makes great colors.
Descartes had said that light was created when a stream of particles hit the eye. Newton investigated whether light and color was created in...
Yeah, well, just wait. He actually he names these particles.
I'd like to know how he's seen the particles.
Well, he used prisms, but he talks about stuff that nobody else can see. This
in the eye or by the brain, risking his eyesight time and again.
This has
I took
got
a
to be
bodkin and put it between my eye and the bone, as near to the back side of my eye as I could. And pressing my eye with the end of it, so as to make the curvature in my eye, there appeared several white, dark, and coloured circles.
I could see a Satanist doing stuff like this. Yeah.
For centuries, philosophers from Aristotle to Descartes thought white light was pure and that colours were produced by modifying white light. Eventually, Newton turned this theory on its head. Using prisms, Newton proved white light is made up of primary colours, the colours of the rainbow. By the late 1660s, word of Newton's extraordinary scientific discoveries spread across Europe, but his religious inspiration was ignored.
Right?
It's funny.
Newton himself wanted to design a universe in which God was absolutely present and absolutely powerful. There's an enormous irony there. In the 18th century, gangs of interpreters, most of them French, will take the God out of Newton's world, and we will be left with a clockwork universe. I mean, it's a very common image of what the Newtonian world was, that it was soulless, that it was mechanical, that it was a piece of clockwork, that it really wasn't theologically motivated at all.
To this day, this purely mechanical picture of Newton's universe is still accepted worldwide.
That's a fact. I mean, it's
ridiculous, man.
That's what
he held the prism up to the sunlight and colors shined on the wall. He figured out. No, he didn't figure out anything, man.
No, in fact, his stuff with prisms and light were further shown to be wrong and corrected. So he really, I don't know that he has anything of value whatsoever that he's given, because gravity is utter nonsense. His light work was wrong. Oh, his alchemy, that he knew how to make fool's gold, and that made him really, really rich and the head of the mint.
But in Jerusalem lies evidence of the scale of deception that has been perpetrated on generations. Dr. Stephen Snowbelland, an historian, has come to examine some of the 4,000 pages written by Newton that were sold at auction but not bought by the economist Maynard Keynes.
What these manuscripts reveal is a very different Newton than most people conceive of. A thinker who had a grand, unified project to uncover God's truth, God's true doctrines. This is a Newton who is not a cold, calculating scientist. This is revealing Newton in all his glory, warts and all, if you will. We see his theology, we see his science, we see his alchemy.
His alchemy.
Alchemy was Newton's dark secret.
Wow.
For 25 years, from about 1668, Newton devoted himself to this illegal and clandestine practice.
Yeah, illegal. And it's not just illegal, it's these recipes are with like the blood of a sordid whore. It's
that pinch of frog's back, and
yes, it's just like all the other witchcraft. This is, the alchemist is, usually a guy. And it's been sort of like whitewash as just being metallurgy, but there's spells, incantations, and it's a form of witchcraft.
For centuries, alchemists had searched for the philosopher's stone, the mythical ingredient that transformed base metals into the purest gold. Many fraudsters claimed to possess it.
In some instances, it was immensely profitable. You could milk Duke or Prince of a substantial amount of money, no question. But if you got caught, it was extremely dangerous. We know that one of the customary punishments for defrocked alchemists, as it were, was to be hanged on a gilded scaffold. And sometimes they were forced to wear suits of tinsel as they were hanged to make it a public spectacle.
Newton secretly became one of Europe's leading alchemists.
of Europe's leading alchemists.
These rules in general should be observed. First, that the fire be quick. Second, that the crucible be thoroughly heated before anything be put in. Third, the metals be put in successively, according to their degree of fusibility: iron, copper, antimony, tin, lead. Fourth, that they stand sometime after fusion before they be poured off according to the quantity of regulus they yield: iron, copper, tin, lead. Fifth, that no salt be thrown in, unless one iron to keep it from hardening. Sixth, that if you would have the saltpeter flow, without too great a heat, you may quicken it by throwing a little saltpeter mixed with 1/8 or 1/16 of charcoal, finely powdered.
Why Newton took up the fraudulent practice of alchemy has baffled people for 300 years. He worked in strict secrecy. Even an assistant working with him did not know what Newton was seeing in the crucible.
What his aim might be, I was not able to penetrate into. But his pains, his diligence, as those times made me think, he aimed at something far beyond the reach of human art and industry.
"250 years later, when the economist Maynard Keynes gazed on Newton's private manuscripts, he was appalled. He assumed the great scientist appeared to be a magician, dabbling..."
See? Somebody comes along, finds his notes, and all of a sudden this guy that looked like he was some sort of great mind turns out that he was a magician.
He was doing divinations and soothsaying and coming up with all types of magical formulas, right? Doing things with the scriptures that you're not supposed to do.
An occultist.
With the occult. Today, researchers are still trying to penetrate Newton's alchemical mind. At Indiana University in the United States, Professor Bill Newman has spent years deciphering Newton's coded recipes. He has redone experiments that Newton did 300 years ago. The task has been immense. Newton, like other alchemists, believed alchemical recipes were buried within ancient texts, from the Bible to Greek myths.
In some instances, he interprets the myths in a very, very exact way so that they correspond to actual recipes that you can carry out in the laboratory.
So now what this narrator guy is referring to as myths is now when they're talking about the Bible, these are the myths. And that's the twist that they put with it.
This is wrong, guys. Everyone here knows that Yahushua didn't say that my scriptures, my holy word, is going to teach you how to mix up gold.
Yeah, well, what is it that they're after? That
how to produce gold.
Yeah, what did they call that though? They'll say it again.
Professor Newman recreates a recipe that was derived from a myth found in the writings of the Roman poet Ovid. According to Isaac Newton, this recipe, called the net, should create a purple alloy that was one step towards discovering the Philosopher's Stone.
Oh yeah, the Philosopher's Stone. Yeah, Ditmar K. True alchemy brings you to the greatness of God. And that would be with a small g. That would be Satan.
And we're not supposed to worship anything of this place, especially not like the metal and all of the gold is Yahweh's. It's not ours, right? I don't know.
Yeah. No alchemy necessary.
Behold the net. It worked. A purple alloy with a striated net-like surface. Worked perfectly.
See, anybody can do that. You can. It's like cooking dinner. You can follow a recipe. You can heat things together on the stove, and It doesn't bring you closer to God.
Newton, like all alchemists, concealed his ingredients in colorful riddles.
Yeah, concealed it in colorful riddles. And here you're going to hear the secrets.
What's...
Our body, thus compounded, is called our hermaphrodite.
Yeah, hermaphrodite, right?
Whoa.
Being of two sexes, and it is both father and mother to the stone.
Father and mother to the stone, hermaphrodite.
Yeah, he misinterpreted the Book of Thomas, that's all.
Mm-hmm.
Hermaphrodite refers to the Regulus of antimony that you get by combining stibnite with iron at high temperature.
Newton uses codes like the green lion, the sordid whore, and the menstrual blood of the sordid whore to describe other metals.
The sordid blood of a whore to describe other metals.
So what was Newton keeping concealed? Important clues have been found at King's College, Cambridge, where Newton's manuscripts, bought by the economist Maynard Keynes, are securely kept. Professor Rotanzi says Newton's own handwritten copy of an ancient alchemical treatise reveals the secret purpose of his alchemical quest.
This is the Tabula Smaragdina. The whole secret of the Philosopher's Stone is supposed to be concealed in this pretty short document.
But Professor Rotanzi says Newton was seeking the Philosopher's Stone not to become rich by turning metal into gold, but as part of his search for God's secrets.
The alchemists believed that this document not only described how God created the universe, it also enabled the alchemist to imitate the work of God.
No. God spoke. He didn't get out potions and
so the narrator says he wasn't doing this just to be able to get rich by counterfeiting gold. He was doing this to be able to create just like the creator does.
And he wasn't even denying that he was doing it to get wealthy. He was saying not just that.
Right.
Imitating the work of God, he could achieve miracles in nature. He's not a magician in the sense that he wants to master these forces so that he can use them to do marvelous things. It's ultimately to understand the mystery of and secrets of God's creation.
And like this guy knows, right? He can speak.
Yeah, he knows. He was there.
Newton believed God had handed down his secrets to disciples like Noah, and that they survived in fragmented form in scripture, ancient text, myths, and especially in alchemical literature.
He never loses faith in
alchemical literature. Was illegal, and they wrote in all these coded, sordid blood of a menstrual horror stuff.
It was the fallen angels who taught men metallurgy. It's Enoch documented it clearly. It wasn't Yahushai or Yahweh. This is complete heresy. Like, if anybody wants to deny me on that, all you have to do is read the first book of Enoch, and you're going to find out that it was the fallen angels.
It was.
As concealing some of the greatest secrets of the universe, if you could decode them.
Newton felt he was specially chosen by God to decode them.
He writes his name in Latin, Isaacus Newtonus, and he plays around with the anagram and he turns it into Jehovah Sanctus Unus, one.
Yes.
Jehovah?
Yeah, right here.
He calls himself God.
Well, keep in mind that so he's working for the Vatican, and the guy who made up the letter J and made up the letter V had just done so, before he was on the scene. So these were brand new letters coming out of the Vatican. And yeah, so like as an anagram, because his name was Isaac, and the I was now being, the J was being used. So he made up this name Jehovah, right? Jehovah Sanctus Unus, or Jehovah the Great One. And this was his pen name. Right? These guys worked under aliases. They had pen names, just like, Sir Samuel Rowbotham went under the pen name Parallax. This is another Freemasonic thing.
Francis Bacon was Shakespeare.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, yeah, here in this article, he pursued alchemy and Arianism. And this guy here says, I'm going to have to save the Arianism stuff for another post. Well, that's where you deny that Yahushua is the creator. And so that is heretical right there, to deny that. So yeah. So really the popularization of Jehovah was something done by
wow,
Newton. And that makes me so sick. I was raised Jehovah's Witness, and yeah, the reason why this information I'm going through right now is because my mom had sent me a letter. I'm going to make a video about this, but I've been pushing on my parents to care about the truth, and here they are, still Jehovah's Witnesses, still believing that they're on a spinning ball flying through space, and it's beyond obvious now that they are part of the satanic cult of heliocentrism, and they worship at the feet of like a Sir Isaac Newton. They're cult followers.
Holy God. So there are already signs there of a fairly strong sense in the young Cambridge student that he's odd, that he's special, that he's picked out, that he is, to use the alchemical phrase, an adept, someone particularly equipped by the gift of grace, not only to pursue his studies, but to interpret the world.
Newton believed that through alchemy, he was finding God's secrets.
Through alchemy, he's finding God's secrets. Well, yeah. See, it's got the little face there in the background of the screen. When you're using alchemy and you're using those dark magic practices, you might be getting some secrets revealed to you, but it's not from the creator of this world. It's from Satan, the devil.
This strange mix of what was called vulgar chemistry, myth and mystical imagery, helped form his unique perception of the world. Professor Newman believes one of Newton's basic experiments gave him an insight into the true nature of color.
Now, when Newton performs his optical experiments with the prism, it's quite possible that he was thinking of the prism as dividing up the white light into different types of particles, in much the same way as you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
That's pure Satanism right there, dividing the light, trying to figure out, like, whoa, this is getting real bad.
Oh, yeah, it gets worse.
It when you distill the more subtle particles from the more gross ones.
Just when Newton was furtively immersing himself fully in the mysteries of the crucible, his earlier scientific achievements brought him worldly advancement.
But since I observe the geometers that are mistaken in a particular property of light that belongs to refractions, tacitly founding their demonstration on a certain physical hypothesis.
Aged just 26, he was made Lucasian Professor of Mathematics. Now he had to give lectures, but he had little time for students. and they had little interest in this incomprehensible, prudish professor. Years later, his assistant would record.
So few went to him, and fewer that understood him, that oftentimes he did, in a manner, for want of hearers, read to the walls.
But Newton faced a terrible dilemma the day he had started to climb the academic ladder. He would be required to take holy orders and become a cleric in the Anglican Church. This set him on a collision course that threatened to end in his disgrace. He researched the history of Christianity and became convinced that both the Catholic and the Anglican Church were founded on a corruption of the Word of God.
That's true.
Now, because...
Yeah, so, but it's a false dichotomy. He's gonna swap out one heretical teaching for another.
Because Newton was so convinced that God is extremely powerful and unique, Newton, as the saying goes, reads himself into heresy. In other words, Newton begins to minimize, to play down, eventually to deny the divinity of Christ.
And Newton comes to the conclusion very early on that the Trinity is a blasphemy on the first commandment.
That's bad. Deny that Yahushua was God. That's exactly what the Antichrist spirit does.
Because the first commandment says that thou shalt have no other gods before me, and the worship of the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost from Newton's point of view is a heresy.
Which is true.
Well, I can see.
The way the Catholics teach the Trinity is completely wrong, and he knew it because he was on the inside. He knows that it's a mistranslation, and that at some point we'll get to the study on it, but he knew that the Catholic Church was teaching heresy. Of course, the Catholic Church knows it as well. And he was very tight, and he got face to face with, King James, and he became the president of the Royal Society and stuff. He took this stance to act like he was against the church, and at the same time, all he was doing is rolling out another deception. So it's more divide and conquer tactic that's used constantly.
So by the early 1670s, Newton had become a secret heretic. He was convinced the doctrine of the Trinity, to which Henry VIII had dedicated Trinity College, was a form of blasphemy.
If Newton had been exposed while he was at Cambridge as an anti-Trinitarian, his career would have been over. He would have been ostracized. It's almost certain that it wouldn't have involved being put to death, but definitely prison would have been one possibility.
Yeah.
Just to point out, they also wore dresses and wigs, right? These men.
Yeah.
Makeup. Right?
Well, I think his political party was the Whigs.
Just to bring that into this whole conversation, that right there in itself is blasphemy.
Yeah. Yeah, their whole parliament, all of that. What a bunch of clowns.
Gross.
Newton would also have risked becoming a target for mobs of heretic hunters, often whipped into a frenzy by the clergy.
Now, see, the heretic hunters are being portrayed as bad people here, like they're witch hunters, but that's a good thing. Like, you had to get rid of the witches. The Bible, you had to get rid of the witches. These people had to be put to death. You couldn't just let them run around. And, a good way to do that is to burn them. You don't want to leave anything behind, just burn them. And so, yeah, if he was caught practicing this alchemy, the good Christians back then that know that this is wrong would have probably hunted him down and burned him. That's how you deal with a witch or a sorcerer.
Well, another thing that's really crazy about that is that I read an article on the Drudge that said that America, the women are like some crazy amount. I think the amount of witches now outnumber the Christians.
And that's the reason why this world needs to burn.
Scary.
Get rid of all those witches.
A heretic, like a witch, is a threat, not just to truth, but to you. It's a physical threat. It's going to compromise and corrupt the community. So very often, we know, from witch hunts, the mob, the people, will take direct action against these sorts of individuals. People are lynched. People are kicked to death. They're burned.
The violence of the times is reflected in Newton's suppressed manuscripts. In these, he focuses his anger on the monks who corrupted Christianity by imposing the Trinity.
We can see page after page of material in which he tries to argue that the early church fathers, they're actually villains. They're criminals. And in some cases, he actually calls them murderers for some of the things that they had done.
And they followed vanity and became vain.
When requested to give a lay sermon, Newton used the Bible to condemn the Catholic Church's use of idolatry.
And they left all the commandments of the Lord their God, and made them molten images, even to calves, and made a grove, and worshipped all the host of heaven, and served Baal.
In the privacy of his rooms, Newton rejoiced in the torture of nuns he reads about in an ancient history book.
First he commanded ye sacred nuns or virgins to be assembled and searched by midwives, and then hung up with weights at their feet, and tortured with heated plates of iron applied to several parts of their bodies, saying, "Confess to us how you bishops and priests lie with you."
Oh, he loves some of it, where
getting
tragically
gay.
awful things happen to Roman Catholic nuns. You can hear
that
Newton
was-
saying,
He didn't say nuns there. He said bishops and priests.
Yeah, well, it gets more gay coming up.
Wow. Well, they dressed
because
wigs.
the Antichrist is suffering. And I think we have to remember, for somebody like Newton, Roman Catholics aren't really human. They're compromised by the Antichrist. It's the same sort of argument that allows Cromwell to slaughter tens of thousands of Roman Catholic peasants. They're not really human.
Newton studied biblical texts obsessively. He had 30 Bibles in many languages, including Arabic and Hebrew. The books of prophecy, Daniel and Revelation, were his favorite texts, although they were often dismissed for their violent symbolism. Newton felt these contained, in code, the words of God and a description of past and future events.
That's true. And Revelation, Daniel, they put us right in the time zone that we're in right now.
From his reading of Revelation, Newton became convinced God foresaw that the Catholics would corrupt pure Christianity.
I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-coloured beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet colour, and decked with gold, and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of fornication. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, mother of harlots and abominations of the earth.
This is a very powerful...
Yeah, but listen, the commentator here is going to make it sound like Isaac was against all this, but it's pretty obvious from the position that he's in that he was glorifying it, and that he knows that he's part of Mystery Babylon. He's like one of the top guys in it, president of the Royal Society, and the Vatican. That's where the great deception, heliocentrism, comes from. And here you've got one of the top magicians that promote it. So
powerful imagery. Newton associated the Catholic Church with a form of fornication. This was spiritual fornication, because if one imagines the pure church as a chaste virgin, then it makes sense to think in terms of the Catholic Church, the Trinitarian Church, as a harlot who had committed fornication with corrupt, non-biblical teachings. And it reveals a passionate hatred.
Just as Newton looked into
Mystery Babylon, Mystery Babylon. Where do all these mysteries come from? The secrets, the code words, the handshakes, the symbolisms. Mystery Babylon.
to the books of prophecy to see God's plans unfolding, so he looked into his alchemical crucible to find God's laws of the universe. Today, Professor Newman can see what Newton saw 300 years ago. Metals seem to come to life and grow like plants. In a secret, unpublished manuscript on the vegetation of metals, Newton gave an alchemical view of the universe.
His manuscript on vegetation begins with a discussion of metallic trees, and from that he then launches into a long expose of the theory that the Earth is alive and that it respires, exhales, inhales.
All right, so for all you globe earthers out there that worship at the feet of Sir Isaac Newton, pay attention to what Sir Isaac Newton really thought, that Earth was alive, that it breathed, and listen, there's more.
Newton said an almost magical ingredient called salnitrum made the Earth into a living being.
Have you heard of salnitrium?
No.
I guess salnitrium made Earth a living being.
I've seen people doing what he's doing with certain types of metal, though. It's not new.
No, you ever see those, squished up little things that you drop them in water and then they,
yep,
snake-like things come out?
Yeah. There's also, I was watching, just had a break today. I saw this Discovery Channel thing for 1 minute, and it showed these trees in the north. When it turns to frost, they actually grow hair. The water gets pushed out of the tree, and it grows like hairs. It's amazing. Even ice, right?
So salnitrium. Pay attention to salnitrium here.
He believed salnitrum continually circulated from the stars to the fiery core of the Earth, bringing life to the metals he saw in his flask and feeding plants.
This Earth resembles a great animal, or rather, inanimate vegetable. Draws in ethereal breath for its daily refreshment and vital fun.
Flat Earth.
And transpires.
Flatwater did a video where he exactly spoke that and said that the tides were proof of this constant in and out breathing. But really, all that he's doing is uncovering certain parts of the simulation. Really, that's all he's doing.
Mm-hmm. But putting magical, occult,
worshiping it, praying, and
attributing it to false gods, false reasons,
with gross exhalations.
Newton even uses this unproven alchemical theory to explain the cause of gravity.
Did you get that?
Wow, I don't know how he grew some piece of metal upwards, and he said that helped him understand gravity.
Mm-hmm.
That's wow.
Salnitrium, listen to this. This is huge.
With gross exhalations.
Newton even uses this unproven alchemical theory to explain the cause of gravity.
It comes down exceedingly rapidly as this very, very fine material that's completely imperceptible to our senses. But
it's very, very fine and completely imperceptible, right? There's absolutely no proof, no way of measuring, no way of seeing, no evidence for it whatsoever.
Imperceptible.
And this is the key thing. This is responsible for bodies falling to the surface of the Earth. In other words, it's a mechanism, a mechanical explanation of gravity.
Mechanical explanation of gravity that has no evidence for it.
Today, this experiment causes no surprise, and certainly doesn't help to explain the mechanical cause of gravity. It's just the reaction of a metal compound in a silicate solution.
Debunked.
But Newton's alchemy convinced him the hand of God influenced all things. Even tiny particles seemed to live and grow in his crucible. He mocked scientists like Descartes, who saw an inert, godless world.
Were men and beasts made by fortuitous jumblings of atoms? There'd be many parts useless in them.
All right, so right here, he's spouting. Keep in mind the time period here, people. He's spouting off about atoms. This is ancient Greece philosophy, like another thing that's never been seen, never been measured, never been witnessed. It's all lies, made up. Ancient Greek philosophies. So really, if you study the Pythagoreans and all, you'll come to see that this sect right here that Newton and his peers were all involved in was just really just a revitalized kickoff of the old Pythagoreans. No different.
Here a lump of flesh, there a member too much. Some kinds of beasts might have had but one eye, some more than two. Atoms, mechanical laws, and nothing when compared to the knowledge and wisdom of the Creator.
In 1675, Isaac Newton emerged from the womb of Trinity. His double life was in danger of being revealed. He could no longer put off the obligation as a professor to become a cleric, but that was against his heretical beliefs. So he set off to London to convince King Charles II to excuse him from taking holy orders.
So who gets to just go set off to meet with the king to say, I want to be excused. I don't want to do that.
Wow.
After seeing the king's advisors, Newton attended his first meeting of the...
They're all wearing dresses and wigs, bro. This is tranny city. Like, straight out in the open. Nobody even said anything that they were dressing like women. Completely.
Yeah. The tights, the dresses, the long hair.
The wigs, the makeup. They have stockings on. Hello? Hello? Just me? They were burning witches and they were having gay sex and wearing wigs and makeup on their own? I don't get it. That seems very hypocritical.
The Royal Society, the leading scientific body.
Scientific, yes.
Satanic.
Satanic.
Newton was just 33, but most members of the society held him in awe.
Yep.
Go figure.
Got the shout out.
He was delighted by his reception, and he agreed to send to the Royal Society a revolutionary paper he had written called An Hypothesis Explaining the Properties of Light.
Hypothesis is the key word there.
Yeah. Which, I mean, it was later proven to be wrong, not correct.
Wrong.
Yeah. But because I'm going to send you my hypothesis on light, I wish to be excused from my duties.
Later that year, over 4 weeks, Newton's work was read to the Royal Society. The author stayed in his laboratory.
Observation of flame and vital motions. For nature is a perpetual circulatory worker, generating fluids out of solids and solids out of fluids, fixed things out of volatile and volatile out of fixed, subtle out of gross, and gross out of subtle.
The eminent member...
He's said nothing.
of the Royal Society must have been puzzled by the alchemical language that mirrored Newton's secret manuscript on the vegetation of metals.
Very thinly and subtly diffused through it. Perhaps of an unctuous or gummy, tenacious and springy nature.
Newton's hidden alchemy seemed to be giving new insights into science and also into God's way. And Newton was elated. He'd heard the news he'd been waiting for. King Charles II had exempted him from taking holy orders without knowing he was excusing a heretic. For the moment...
Oh, I have a feeling he knew.
Newton was safe. But he would be tormented for the rest of his life. Should he stay silent or denounce the corruption of the Anglican Church publicly?
If the Trinity is still here, so is the Antichrist. It's not something you can just sort of shrug off and say, oh, I'll deal with that tomorrow. It's not something that goes away when you go to sleep. It's going to haunt your dream.
Newton could reassure himself that he was doing God's will. His grand project was to understand all God's secrets, of the creation, of the forces that held the universe together, and of God's plans for the second coming of Christ and the return to pure Christianity. As an adept, Newton believed that he was chosen to decode the secrets locked in the work of the ancients.
You know what that is?
It's blueprints, drawings, yeah.
Of course, Solomon's Temple, which the Freemasons are just gaga over trying to decipher something, but...
He was rediscovering what a select few who had been chosen by God to share these secrets had done in the past. And he ultimately becomes convinced that he is in fact special. He has the special confidence of God.
Newton thought ancient temples also held secrets only chosen people like himself could unravel.
And the Masons.
He was fascinated by...
Right. Because they built them. And we'll get to that. You know, the secrets are within the Great Pyramids and Stonehenge, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because they made them.
Yeah. Not that long ago.
By King Solomon's temple, right, that once stood above the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem. Newton saw the design of the temple encoded in the Bible, and he spent years attempting to break this code.
For Newton, the scenes of the Book of Revelation take place in the heavenly temple. And so in order to understand the Book of Revelation, in order to interpret the symbols, he needed to understand what the temple looked like.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the Creator doesn't live in any building built by man's hands.
Yeah, look at... Let's see, is... see, well, there, yeah. This is what Isaac Newton was into. Master Mason diploma. We got too much stuff to go through.
The temple could even reveal the date when this corrupt world would end in the apocalypse, and true Christianity would be reborn.
It was, for him, the object of some of his prophetic hopes, because he believed the temple was going to be rebuilt, reestablished in Jerusalem when Christ returned. So this was a part of his prophetic hope. He believed this was going to happen.
Newton thought the temple would also increase his scientific knowledge.
He believed that the Temple of Solomon was a literal blueprint for the secrets of the universe, its orientation, its size. He redrew it. He did fundamental mathematical calculations on it to understand and plumb the universe at large, and in essence, the mind of God.
In England, near Salisbury, there's a piece of antiquity called Stonehenge. It seems to be an ancient temple. for it is an area compassed circularly with 2 rows of very great stones, with passages on all sides for people to go in and out of.
Newton only visited Stonehenge in his imagination, but he was sure it...
It sounds like Robotham, who never went to Australia, right? He imagined it all.
Never went there, but yet blubbers and slanders on that this right here is a key to understanding the universe.
It also revealed the wisdom of the ancients.
He told this story that in ancient times, people knew that the sun was in the middle of the world, the planets orbit the sun, there was a force of gravity between the planets and the sun, and Newton said the ancients knew that. Okay, now how did he know that the ancients knew these things? Well, one sign was that the ancients built buildings which symbolized
Sure,
the
it
solar
wasn't in the
system.
scriptures.
But the ancient temples.
No.
Right? You can't go to any scriptures to prove this point. No doubt he had to take it to the builders who built the buildings with stones right away. Wow. The ones who rejected the cornerstone, I bet.
Mm-hmm. Oh, just wait. This Stonehenge is such a huge fail here. It's funny.
Had fires in the middle, which stood for the sun. So he understood Stonehenge as an image of the solar system, with its central fire, and then the sarsen stones as a series of concentric rings standing for the orbits of the planets.
He can imagine priests walking around Stonehenge chanting.
You can imagine priests walking around chanting
their songs, carrying on the Vestal religion, which was the religion that presumably God gave to Adam. Newton is reading in his views into Stonehenge. You know, that there is no remnants of a fire at the middle of Stonehenge.
There is no remnants of a fire.
Depends on which site we're investigating, because the thing's been moved a bunch of times, right?
Mm-hmm. And from this, he's extrapolating heliocentrism.
I think Newton treats the evidence of Stonehenge in the same way that he treats most other pieces of evidence. He has a hunch, and he ruthlessly crunches evidence to make it fit his own case. Whether it's science or looking at the ancient religion, he's like a brilliant lawyer.
He probably came up with the drawing of it. That's where they made it from. He drew it, and then they put it together.
He never even went out.
It's cyclic reasoning, right? So you find a fossil in a rock. You go, well, how old is the rock? Oh, well, we know it's old because it has a fossil in it. Well, how do you know if the rock's old? Oh, well, we know it if it has fossils in it. That's all they do.
In 1684, Edmund Halley, a young astronomer, asked Newton a question that would refocus his scientific genius on gravity, the mysterious force that binds the universe together.
Truly remarkable invention. Thank you.
Mirror requires work.
My question is this. What kind of curve would be described by the planet, supposing the force of the attraction toward the sun to be reciprocal to the square of the distance from it?
An ellipse.
An ellipse? How do you know?
I've done the calculation.
You have? How did you calculate it?
I'll show you.
It has to be an ellipse, right?
Should be here somewhere.
Right.
Because it's not even, right? So everything had to be skewed and elliptical and 2 north poles, and because it's wrong.
Correct. Even if you go through what he said about gravity, he talks about how everything is affected differently. And it was just like, because back at this time, they didn't know much. They didn't have the ability to model this out the way you can with a computer. So they just wanted fudge room, and they were just magicians. They talk crap, and they went around in their wigs and their leggings, and somehow people gave them respect. I don't know why.
Halley's question would change science forever. It caused Newton 3 years' frenzied work.
Don't worry, I will redo the calculations. I'll send you a copy.
Some months later, Halley received a short tract on the motion of planets in orbit. In his hand, Halley had the seeds of Newton's The Principia Mathematica, published in 1687.
It is the greatest book of science ever written, bar none.
Wow. So to come up with his mathematical, so for everything to be moving and flying with absolutely no evidence, imperceptible, whatever that word was, he came up with the math.
Yes. The calculus.
And then it all made sense.
Mm-hmm. Which is, the calculus is just math and magic tricks. He's a great magician.
It is the most magnificent work. It is the most all-encompassing work. It is the most daring book of any scientific treatise ever written.
Most daring book of any scientific treatise ever written. Because this is so funny what they say here, I think.
In the Principia, Newton spelt out the laws of motion, but his greatest achievement was the universal law of gravity.
This is saying that something on one end of the universe, billions of miles away, actually exerts an attraction through all the intervening material on one tiny particle on the other side of the universe. That is an extraordinary thought, and in my view and the view of everybody else who's looked at it, there is simply nothing like that in physics up to that point.
Yeah.
Wow.
There was nothing like that up to that point, that there was a force being exerted on one side of the universe that was affecting.
He was like your counterpart. I think you're such a zealot, and you're so you're so like the way that you are. He was the exact opposite way. He was like extra satanic. He went all in. Right?
Oh yeah. Oh, but how I would have loved to have been able to go toe to toe with some little femboy fag that
my money's on you, brother. I'm sorry.
He's dancing around in his tights and his long hair, and he's going to tell me that there's a force on the other side of the universe. It's
the sun is imperceptible. The sun is between 20 and 90 million miles away, even though you're pointing at it. Well, there's clouds behind it with them. Good luck.
And the water hangs on a ball upside down. Yeah. If I was back there in those days, I would have lynched them.
The other thing too, they say that snowflakes are created by a particle of dust. Well, why is it when we grab snow and we melt it down, we don't have any dust or dirt in it? I'd like science to answer that.
Mm-hmm. I just want to rewind this. This is the mother lode. If you are a heliocentric believer, you are following this satanic cult, and your God is Sir Isaac Newton
of gravity.
This is saying that something on one end of the universe, billions of miles away, actually exerts an attraction through all the intervening material on one tiny particle on the other side of the universe. That is an extraordinary thought, and in my view and the view of everybody else who's looked at it, there is simply nothing like that in physics up to that point. Nothing at all.
Go ahead.
The Kabbalah. They covered that.
Yeah. Nobody had the audacity to make such a bold and outlandish, stupid claim. And
no Goyim did, right? He was the first Goyim to do.
Yeah, but he was part of the society. He was.
But deep within the pages of the Principia, especially in the later editions, researchers have discovered clues that show the hidden Newton, the passionate alchemist. Professor Newman has found evidence that Newton gave an alchemical explanation for gravity when describing the roll of comets.
As far as the natural world went.
Comets.
Right? Falling stars. That's what we're going to here.
Yeah, this is going to be an explanation for how the entire universe works.
No doubt. Off of a falling star. Yeah, Satan fell to earth, right? Come on.
Funsweed says, stop the tranny cap. That was the style of dress. No, the style of dress was because they were a bunch of trannies.
Wearing makeup and wigs, man or woman. Are you joking with me? Where are you gonna? That's like saying that horizon there. It's curved. Trust me, it's curved. You just can't see the curve, but it's curved.
Yeah, guys that walk around in dresses and in tights right now
with makeup on and wigs. What are those called?
Trannies.
He did have a unified vision, and even in the Principia, we find the Salnitrum, the Niter theory, where he says that the tails of comets sink down to the Earth.
The Salnitrium again.
Oh, here we go.
It comes off the tails of the comets, right?
And then are somehow buoyed back up into the outer reaches of space and eventually serve as the food of the sun that allows it to continue to burn. So he was thinking in terms of this circulation theory, even at the time of composing and revising the Principia.
Newton also believed...
That's been debunked, right? Now they say the sun is a perpetual furnace burning on its own molten core or whatever, right?
Yeah, well, it's all made up nonsense.
Comets don't feed the sun.
But that was the source of his reasoning for how gravity worked.
No,
for real. That's what they just said there. That was.
You know what? He might as well have just hung 2 balls in his shed and called it a day.
Comets were instruments of God's wrath, devastating weapons that would wipe out the corrupt world and bring the apocalypse as foretold in the Bible.
No, that's probably true.
He's the father of the new
Research the Bible.
No, he's saying the comets. Comets are going to bring doomsday destruction, and
that's probably true. Yeah.
That's probably true. He's not wrong about everything.
For the dates when the earth would end in a fiery maelstrom, and for Christ's return to usher in 1,000 years of pure Christianity.
That's not real, though.
It had to be more than one comment, right?
The 1687 edition of the Principia only contains one reference to God as creator, but in later editions, Newton stressed the all-powerful role of God in his universe.
You just left that out, eh? Just had to leave that out of the book?
Yeah.
So devout, eh?
So devout.
The most beautiful system of the sun, planets, and comets could only proceed from the counsel and dominion of an intelligent and powerful being.
Similarities here to modern-day Christians that come with the cross and say that they're Christians, and the Bible says flat Earth. And
oh, yeah.
As Christian as Isaac Newton. Sir Isaac Newton.
Mm-hmm.
God, therefore, place the planets at different distances from the sun, so that according to their degrees of density, they may enjoy a greater or lesser proportion of the sun's heat.
See, how many of these atheists that tout this guy, the father of gravity, go around telling everybody that he said that the Creator put them in their places. Right? They skip that part. Look at these clowns.
When Newton was at the height of his fame, he was driven by his hatred of Catholics to oppose the Catholic King James II. He came up against notorious Judge Jeffreys, the Lord Chancellor, known as the hanging judge for his brutality. Newton rose up against the king because a Catholic was handed a degree at the university, at a time when all Catholics were barred.
A mixture of papists and Protestants in the same university can neither subsist happily nor long together.
It was a risky strategy.
And if the fountains once be dried up...
But if one appeared in front of the Lord Chancellor, one was certainly going to risk at least a tongue lashing and probably something much worse.
I will say to you what the scriptures say. Go your way and sin no more, lest a worse fate befalls thee.
Newton lost his battle, but the very next year the Catholic king was forced to flee the country. Newton the alchemist and secret heretic was catapulted into public life. He was elected an MP for Cambridge. but the lure of the crucible kept him chained to his furnace. Finally, in 1693, God's ultimate secret seemed tantalizingly within his reach. He watched transfixed, as gold mixed with a special mercury seemed to swell before his eyes. Was this the philosopher's stone?
You catch that? Gold mixed with a certain mercury seemed to swell.
Yeah.
What would happen if your amount of gold that you had swelled? If you could increase its volume? Yeah. So, all of this alchemy hinges right around being fraudulent with gold, trying to get rich off of it.
He tried the experiment again and again, but he was wrong. The experiment had failed.
He realized that this was the end of the struggle. I think there's no question that he was disappointed, because he was looking for ultimate answers to questions, and he had failed in alchemy as he had not failed in any other pursuit.
There were other tensions. Newton had grown very close to a brilliant young mathematician and alchemist, Nicolas Fatio de Douillet.
Pray, let me know by a line or two whether you can have lodgings for us both in the same house at present, or whether you would have me take some other lodgings.
All right, so here's about lodgings, living with some other dude.
I am yours, most affectionately to serve you.
But in 1692, Fatio, a hypochondriac, wrote to tell Newton that he was dying.
I last night received your letter, with which how much I was affected I cannot express. Pray, procure the advice and assistance of physicians before it be too late. And if you want any money, I will supply you. Sir, with my prayers for your recovery, I rest. Your most affectionate and faithful friend to serve you.
I doubt that Newton had a physical relationship with Fatio.
Why would you doubt that, Dr. Rob? Why would you doubt that? What evidence?
But it's quite clear from the correspondence between them that these caused Newton to become emotionally disturbed.
Fatio lived, but a year later this relationship disintegrated. Newton then had a breakdown, accusing his few friends of misdeeds of which they were entirely innocent. He wrote to the diarist Samuel Pepys, president of the Royal Society.
I'm extremely troubled at the embroilment I am in, and have not slept well this 12-month, nor have my former consistency of mind. I never designed to get anything by your interest, nor by King James's favour. But I'm now sensible that I must withdraw from your acquaintance, and see neither you nor my great friends any more.
Newton also wrote an even more vicious letter to his friend John Locke. Newton accused him of trying to
embroil me with women,
and when told Locke was ill, wrote,
"'Twere better if you were dead."
So somebody came out and said, "Hey, just get yourself a girlfriend," and he comes back with, "You'd be better off dead."
Wow.
Yeah, Newton was a homo. He was a fag.
Newton's friends forgave him, and he explained that he had been sick and had not slept for 5 nights.
He was knackered. And the reason he was knackered is because he spent the last 10 years, between, say, the early 1680s and the early 1690s, working all the hours that God sent, and it was Newton who thought that these were hours sent by God. If he had a breakdown, I think it was probably because of exhaustion.
Newton also had to cope both with his emotional crisis over Fatio and his failure to grasp the golden prize alchemy once promised. And all the time, there was the haunting fear of being exposed as a heretic. But he recovered and began a new life. He moved permanently from the cloisters of Trinity to London. Newton now sought and gained money and power. He became president of the Royal Society and master of the Royal Mint, where he earned a fortune.
Master of the Royal Mint, where he earned a fortune. So that there is a tab up here. Let's see, this is from Nova, right? Sinister dark robe sorcerer is trying to turn lead into gold. Is that an accurate picture of the alchemists in Newton's time? It's accurate for some alchemists, but we now know that most of the great minds of the period were involved in alchemy. So Boyle, these guys right here, these are other, like Boyle was another head of the secret society. I think the one before him, so yeah, right here, Isaac Newton, 1691 to 1727. Boyle was the guy before him. This was his peers in society, right? And given that so many great minds were interested in it, why was alchemy illegal? Well, first of all, it became legal during Newton's time, but why was it illegal? There is a long association, for good reasons, between alchemy and counterfeiting. It's quite likely, actually, that medieval and early modern rulers were consciously employing alchemists to debase their own coinage. But they didn't want other people doing it after. Yeah, right, exactly. So what the alchemists were doing, where they were making fool's gold and
counterfeiting money.
Counterfeiting.
Yes, of course they didn't want anyone else doing it. They killed them. They burned them alive. They hung them up in the sky and burned them. But unless
you actually did it for the king.
But there was only a few, right?
Yeah.
This is who everybody holds their value in. Most of the modern day.
Yeah, a counterfeiter.
But all the time, he guarded his dark secret.
Right up to his death in 1727, he tried to keep his heresy as secret as possible, because the vast majority of people around him are Orthodox Anglicans. And he thinks, there's no point trying to convince these people of what I'm doing, because the time is not right. These people aren't fit to receive the kind of word that I'm giving out.
Pearl's right.
As he lay dying, Sir Isaac Newton, aged 84, finally revealed his double life. He made clear to startled friends the dangerous heretical belief that he had kept secret for 50 years. He refused to take the last sacrament.
Sir Isaac, there was a time for the last sacrament.
No. I will not die in the embrace of a corrupt church. I have made my peace with God.
Newton had accomplished more than any scientist before him. But some of his achievements lay under...
Gave up the spirit? Is that what they're trying to say?
Yeah. He accomplished more than any other scientist before him, right? The Satanist, he's the one that came up with the most ridiculous idea of all, that gravity is a force that is
a star on the other side of the universe is affecting.
Yeah. He took it the farthest.
Discovered in his hidden manuscripts. All his life, Newton...
They do have like a mark on his forehead here too.
had worked feverishly to uncover God's plans. In Jerusalem, where Newton was convinced Christ would one day return to destroy corruption and usher in 1,000 years of peace and pure Christianity.
See, now he's right again. Now he's correct. That's true.
Stephen Snowbelin has unearthed a remarkable document. This shows that late in life, Newton decoded from the Bible the date he believed would see the beginning of the end of the world, the apocalypse.
A manuscript like this really brings to life that Newton was a deeply religious man, more like a fundamentalist in many ways than many of us would like to think. What he was trying to do...
That was a tough pill for this guy to swallow, huh?
...is determine when the end would come, when Christ would return, when all the apocalyptic events of the end times would come to a head.
The date for all the violence predicted in the book of Revelation. The date Newton prophesied for the apocalypse sits in our century, 2060.
Yeah.
They slow it down. Truth about our reality is being revealed at an alarming rate. Battles are being fought for the truth. And the truth always comes out victorious. Centuries-old lies are being crushed. And the truth remains unscathed. But the truth does not stop to celebrate its victory. It is always advancing.
Yeah, we're not stopping. We're not stopping. So how do you feel, brother? I think we made it through. If you want to cut it short, we can always carry the Flat Earth and Globe Earth discussion group stuff into another hangout. I know you made it through it, though.
Yeah, I started feeling a little bit better along. Let's see, there was so much that I've come across here. So, all right, so there was that whole section there where he was doing all these calculations off of Solomon's temple and stuff like that. But look at this. They have this under a cult. But,
rightfully placed.
Well, look at what it has, though. When he tried to figure out when the end was going to be.
Yeah, I think he's close. He was close.
Look at, he goes, so then the times and half a time are 42 months or 1,260 days or 3 years and a half, reckoning 12 months to a year and 30 days to a month, as was done in the calendar of the primitive year. And the days of short-lived beasts being put to the years of long-lived kingdoms, the period of 1260 days, if dated from the complete conquest of the three kings, AC 800, will end 2060. It may end later, but I see no reasoning for it ending sooner. So he's using just what the scriptures say. You don't have to measure the things of the temple. Scriptures are pretty clear, but then look, he later revised this date to 2016.
Wow. That's real close. Maybe
it's real close. And then if you add 3.5 years to that, what would you come to?
Yeah, 20 and a half. Huh?
It'd be right. Yeah, like right where we're at.
Yeah, he's close.
He's close. Let's see. It's right here. It's pretty clear that it says, as he matured, he became more heavily absorbed in esoteric thinking. He distanced himself from the previous Cartesian mechanistic worldview, and he was a Freemason. This mystical fraternal organization was founded in the 16th century based on the structure of stonemason lodges.
Yes, he was a pure Mason. Yes.
Freemason. So he was initiated into Freemasonry sometime in the mid-1670s when he began rubbing shoulders with a group of Cambridge scholars who went on to create the Invisible College in 1645, the forerunner to the prestigious Royal Society, which Newton was invited to join in 1671 and later became the president of. The Royal Society. So these people were leading physicists, astrologers, and passionate collectors of alchemical texts. So Robert Boyle was the guy before him. His mystical thinking was directly influenced by these famous students of Hereticism and Gnosticism, all of whom have been initiated into the first 3 degrees of Freemasonry. And also, so this Priory of Sion, have you heard of that before?
No, maybe I've heard it on a Edifying Others video.
Okay, so this, like Leonardo da Vinci was alleged to be the 12th Grand Master. So this Priory of Zion is, there's, scholars and reporters and stuff that say this is all a hoax, never happened. Right, but then then there's all this evidence of it that so this is all your Da Vinci Code type stuff. So a lot of this has been made up, but you get the Knights Templar, which is part of this, and so the alleged Grand Masters. Yeah, let me read this paragraph. The mythic version of the Priory of Sion, first referred to during the 1960s, was supposedly led by Nauchenier, an old French word for navigator, which means Grand Master in their internal esoteric nomenclature. The following list of Grand Masters is derived from the dossier Secret de Henry Lobanu, compiled by Plantard under the blah, 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 blah. All those names on this list had died before that date. All but 2 are found on lists of alleged imperators, supreme heads, and distinguished members of the ancient mystical order Rosicrucius, which circulated in France at the time when Plantard was in touch with the Rosicrucian order. So the Priory of Sion and the Knights Templar always shared the same Grand Masters until a schism happened. But if you go through this list, here's the Grand Masters. You get to number 12, Da Vinci, and then Newton. That Boyle that we've talked about here was just before him. So this comes from the Rosicrucians who, Sir Francis Bacon was like Grand Master of the Rosicrucians, and he was like the first quote unquote scientist knighted, and then Newton second. So what you can see here is you have just nothing but a bunch of secret society occultists that created the entire heliocentric model, and it's all been rolled out through the Vatican. Mystery Babylon revealed. Boom.
That's pretty it. That's as much as needs to be said. If you want to know what Mystery Babylon is, it's the ancient practice of trying to explain the universe off the stone buildings that were erected by the Masons, the people that reject Yahushua, because he is the cornerstone, leads you down the path. You get to Isaac Newton, then you get the endless universe with gravity that has an effect across the entire universe, where the sun is powered by eating comets. That's what your mom supposedly refuted the flat earth by providing evidence from a witch.
No. All she did is copy and paste some stuff from Newton.
But that shows her lack of research, because, you know, if I was to provide you with a piece of evidence for anything that I was trying to argue, you better know that I'm going to have already read and researched what I'm sending. That way, if you have a counter argument, I've already, you know, tried to look at the angles of attack. Obviously, she didn't. I hope you put the video together. We were barely even scratched the surface.
Yeah.
On this character, man.
Well, yeah, it's really interesting that my mom brought him up, because you know, he's the fag that really introduced the term Jehovah, and well, they're Jehovah's Witnesses, my parents, right? Mm-hmm. He's the guy that introduced the heresy that Yahushua is just the son of the creator and not the creator. And well, that's what the Jehovah's Witnesses teach. Right? They even mistranslated their Bible to make it work. So the question is does she toe the line because she's just a unwitting servant of Satan, or does she toe the line because she's trying to propagate this information for Satan? Well, we'll find out.
Yeah, you have to send her this video or make another one with a little bit more detail. Yeah. But I think you did a good job covering it tonight. And I know we're both kind of under the weather. I know you're not feeling well, so do you want to cut it short?
Yeah, I'm probably good for the night.
Yeah, I hope you get your rest, brother. But I'm not worried at all. Everybody, we should have a great discussion on Sunday with Zen Garcia. We're going to go over his bloodline theories, where he says that Satan fathered Cain, and we might talk about the flat earth. But the last time he was on, we showed him reasons why the map doesn't work, and he might just continue in error. But more importantly, I'd like to discuss with him the scriptures, because that's what I feel Zen has the most experience with, what I want to talk to him about. I don't know about you, brother.
Yeah, he's heavily entrenched with that AE map model crew. I'd be concerned that he's a Freemason, but he does know scripture, and well, like you said, let's talk about scriptures and start eliminating some heretical teachings.
Well, discussing them. That's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to speak to each other if we're supposed brothers, right? I'm not talking about witches and wizards and Satanists. Okay, the brothers that come in love, right? Not like he's not anything like Nathan Roberts, right? He never snapped on us. We showed him that the A map didn't work, but he feels that because of the way that he read Enoch, we went over all this. I just feel that I'd like to discuss the bloodlines and maybe talk to him about the other side of him. He takes paths that I don't agree with, but he's been doing that the entire time. He might not be perfect on everything, but he does have some interesting things to add to the conversation that I feel are trying to be suppressed. So I don't know. I don't know if let's just see how it goes. That's all. I don't want to get into big ordeals. I just want to discuss the scriptures, and it's a festive time, it's the end of Hanukkah and everybody should be in good moods, right? So
yeah, I'll be as nice as I can, but when it comes to it's not saying much, right?
Well, yeah, I can't tell you to lie, but
yeah, well, I just want to eliminate heretical teachings. If there's two teachings that are diabolically opposed to one another, and only one can be right, then that one should be the one that's upheld, and the rest should be eliminated.
Yeah. Well, just like there's variations in heavenly gifts, there's variations in people that search the truth. And that's why, Jason, I got nothing but love for you, brother. You're one of the most ferocious truth seekers walking the face of the earth. And everyone in the chat, you guys are too. Thank you guys for being here tonight. I really hope that Jason was able to edify you and, shine the light on these cockroaches that call themselves scientists, Satanists, right? We know that that word is interchangeable now. Thank you, brother. I thought you did a great job considering. And I always look forward to more only
beyond flat earth.